Hello friends, welcome to a new episode of Drishti IAS Editorial Analysis. In this editorial analysis, we do three things. First of all, we link the editorial to the UPSC syllabus. Secondly, we try to understand the key points of the editorial. And thirdly, if any key concepts have come in the editorial and are important from exam point of view, we also discuss them. So let us begin today's editorial analysis.
Dear viewer, this video is available in Hindi as well. If you wish to watch it, please visit our Hindi YouTube channel, Drishti IAS. For your convenience, the link for this video in Hindi has been provided in the description below.
We have taken today's editorial from the Indian Express and it has come on 12th of August. The title of the editorial is Green and Red and it says that the Environment Ministry must heed criticism of the draft Environment Impact Assessment and do justice to the process of public consultation. So let us see its linkage with the syllabus. We find that it links directly with GS paper 3, where we have environment as one of the important areas of the syllabus, and under this we have environmental impact assessment as a topic. So after establishing the linkage with the syllabus, let us see the key points of the editorial. So before moving on to the key points of the editorial, let us understand what the controversy is all about. So there has been a lot of hue and cry against the draft EIA notification 2020 issued by the Ministry of Environment and Forest and Climate Change. Now the green activists, they have been quite critical of the draft notification because they feel that a number of contentious clauses have been added which could weaken environmental regulations. And we will see these contentious clauses in some details little later on, but first let us understand what EIA is. So Environmental Impact Assessment or EIA, it basically means a scientific estimate of the likely impacts of a project on the environment, and these projects could be a mining project, a irrigation dam project, or setting up of an industrial unit. And EIA also has a provision for public consultation which includes a public hearing as well, in which the local community and interested persons can give opinions and also raise objections based on the draft EIA report prepared for that project. And after these objections are answered to the satisfaction of the individuals, then the final EIA report is submitted. And why the EIA rules need to be strict? So there is a very good example, and that involves the recent styrene gas leak at the LG Polymers plant in Visakhapatnam on 7th of May. Now the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, it told the National Green Tribunal that the unit lacked environmental clearance and it was functioning for a long time, and this only exposes the low effectiveness of such environmental rules and regulations. So if we will dilute the rules further, then who will save the environment? Another important thing to note here is that the EIA rules must meet the requirements of the precautionary principle of avoiding harm and intergenerational equity, which means that the present generation owes an obligation to the future generations of saving and protecting the environment for them. Now let us see the issues pertaining to the draft EIA notification of 2020. So the first issue is about the post facto approval, and this means that the clearances for projects can be awarded even if they have started construction or are in a running phase without securing environmental clearances, and this is highly problematic because this also means that any environmental damage caused by such project is likely to be waived off as the violation gets legitimized, because the only remedy here would be to impose a fine or punishment, but that would not reverse the detrimental consequences on the environment. More importantly, this post facto approval is a derogation of the fundamental principle of environmental jurisprudence and the violation of precautionary principle, which is the principle of environmental sustainability. Also in 2017, post facto clearance given to projects in Tamil Nadu were struck down by the Madras High Court. The second problem with this draft EIA notification 2020 involves the public consultation process. In the draft notification, a reduction of the time period has been done from 30 days to 20 days for the public to submit their responses during a public hearing for any application seeking environmental clearance. So the time period which is given to the public for raising their grievance has been reduced, and this goes against the very basic principle of having EIA, that is to give public a chance to air its grievance. So the danger here is that if adequate time is not given for the preparation of views, comments and suggestions for those who would be most affected by a project, then such public hearings would not be meaningful. And if the public hearing is not meaningful, the whole EIA process would lack transparency and credibility. And especially this would pose a problem in those areas where information is not easily accessible or areas in which people are not that well aware of the process itself. The third major issue with the draft EIA notification is of compliance report. So the 2006 notification, which is now in operation, it required that the project proponent, which is the project developer, submit a report every 6 months showing that they are carrying out their activities as per the terms on which permission has been given to them. But the new draft requires them to submit a report only once a year. So the period of report submission has been increased from 6 months to 1 year. And the danger here is that during this period, certain irreversible environmental, social or health consequences of the project could go unnoticed because of the extended reporting time. So this also goes against the very basic idea of having EIA. For example, if a mining project is being carried out at some place which can be potentially hazardous to the nearby population and can contaminate the air and water nearby, a half-yearly compliance report would better help in addressing these concerns than a yearly report. So this extension of time period for submission of compliance report is also problematic. Another major concern is of bypassing the EIA process. So the draft notification says that the central government gets the power to categorize projects as strategic. And once a project has been categorized as strategic, the draft notification says that no information related to such project shall be placed in the public domain. And violations can only be reported on such strategic projects suo motu, that is by the project proponent itself or by a government authority, appraisal committee or regulatory authority. And this also goes against the principle of natural justice, because public, which will be most affected by any such project, is not being given the option of registering their grievance against any such project. Also, the draft notification says that a new construction project coming up to 1,50,000 square meters instead of the existing 20,000 square meters do not need detailed scrutiny by the expert committee, nor do they need EIA studies and public consultation. So this is also a dilution of the existing EIA norms. And green activists and civil society at large is not happy with these changes. But if we look at the positive side of the 2020 draft notification, it has a clause dedicated to definitions of several terms related to EIA, which is an improvement over the 2006 EIA notification. Because it will be beneficial in the sense that it will consolidate the EIA rules and will have the potential of alleviating some ambiguity which is present in the existing law. However, certain issues need to be addressed by the ministry. First of all, instead of reducing the time for public consultation, the focus should be on ensuring access to information as well as creation of awareness about the public hearing and its impact upon the whole EIA process. Also, in order to improve the ease of doing business, the government should actually bring down the average delay of 238 days in granting of environmental clearance that emanates from bureaucratic delays and complex laws. So instead of cutting down on the days of public consultation, the bureaucratic delays and the complex laws, they need to be made simpler. And finally, the grow now, sustain later should not be the policy, as this notion is dangerously tilted against the concept of sustainable development. So we should be only moving towards sustainable development and not for development at any cost. So with this background, now let us look at the key points of the editorial. So the editorial says that in March, the Union Minister of Environment, Forest and Climate Change invited public comments on a draft notification that seeks to overhaul the country's environmental impact assessment procedure. The initial deadline set by the ministry was June 30 for providing of feedback by the public, but the Delhi High Court extended this deadline to August 11 in response to a petition by environmental activists. And during these 150 days of the draft notification being in the public domain, the public has responded to this notification by submitting around 4 to 5 lakh responses as per the ministry data. And these responses have included criticism of environmentalists, academics and civil society groups. And concerns have been raised by people from ecologically fragile areas such as the country's northeast, and also objections have been voiced by former Union Environment Minister Shri Jairam Ramesh. Also in parts of Tamil Nadu and Kerala, people have braved the COVID-19 pandemic to register their protest against the proposed changes in the EIA. The Environment Minister Shri Prakash Javadekar has termed these criticisms as premature because according to him it is only a draft notification and it will undergo modification based on the feedback received from the public and experts. But the editorial says that the public consultation process for sure has flagged important concerns regarding the environmental regulatory regime and the ministry must pay heed to them. The editorial then talks about the EIA and it says that the EIA were framed in 1994 to address the safety concerns raised in the decade after the Bhopal gas tragedy of 1984. Also, the EIA is part of the Environmental Protection Act of 1986 and it was last revised in 2006. So, the current notification that is in effect is 2006 notification. And what comes under the ambit of EIA? So, any activity that accesses, utilizes and affects the natural resources falls under its purview. And this regulatory regime has been framed as a social safeguard, as it recognizes that the land sought by project developers could have economic and cultural significance for communities which are inhabiting that land. And in a landmark case in 2000, in the Center for Social Justice versus the Union of India, the Gujarat High Court had observed that the officials are holding public hearings at district headquarters and the persons who are likely to be adversely affected in environmental matters are poor persons who would not travel a long distance between the proposed site and the district headquarters. So this actually dilutes the total process of conducting environmental impact assessment. And because of this, the court also noted that the minutes of the public hearing are either not being recorded or not being given to the concerned persons. And these were the challenges flagged by the Gujarat High Court in this case about how the process of EIA is being done and how it is being diluted by the authorities who are responsible for conducting it. Similarly, the Supreme Court had also flagged the undermining of public hearing procedures in its Vedanta verdict of 2013. So the rules are there and the rules are decently good, but the problem basically lies in how they are being implemented or whether they are being implemented at all. The editorial also points out to some concerns and it says that the proposed amendments to EIA have invited criticism for sanctioning and codifying such dilutions to the regulatory mechanism. First of all, the period of public hearing has been reduced from 30 days to 20 days. And this public hearing is one of the bedrocks of this EIA process, as it allows the public which is getting directly affected by any such project to raise its voice against anything they feel wrong with the project and get it addressed by the authorities. Secondly, the draft legitimizes violations by developers who can begin projects without obtaining due clearances in apparent disregard to the Supreme Court's reservations against post facto certificates. So this is also highly problematic, that this EIA draft notification of 2020 says that there can be post facto approval granted to projects, because this is one practice which should not be entertained by the government at all. Nobody should be allowed to start any project without having due clearances, because the harm caused to environment by such projects cannot be undone by punishing these people or by taking a hefty penalty out of them. Thirdly, the exemptions to projects that ostensibly have environmental benefits like renewable energy parks, etc., has also drawn criticism, as critics have pointed out that such projects also involve diversion of agricultural lands and have a bearing on people's livelihoods. So it is not that a project which seems to be environment friendly should not be made to undergo such EIA process, as they can also have some negative consequences that needs to be addressed at the initial stage itself. Finally, the editorial says that the Environment Ministry must make sure that the final EIA draft does justice to the complex relations between environment, development and local communities that the public consultation process has brought to light. And this is very important, that there has to be a balancing of interests of environment, of development and of the local communities. Then only we can move towards the goal of having sustainable development. So this was all in the key points of the editorial. Now let us look at key concepts. In key concepts, let us look at the Environment Protection Act of 1986. So in the wake of Bhopal gas tragedy, the Government of India enacted the Environment Protection Act of 1986 under Article 253 of the Constitution. So this is very important from prelims point of view, that we should know under which article this Environment Protection Act of 1986 has been enacted. So it is Article 253 of the Constitution. And the purpose of this act is to implement the decisions of the United Nations Conference on the Human Environment. And it authorizes the central government to protect and improve environmental quality, control and reduce pollution, and prohibit or restrict the setting up and operation of any industrial facility on environmental grounds. And it also empowers the central government to establish authorities charged with the mandate of preventing environmental pollution in all its forms and to tackle specific environmental problems that are peculiar to different parts of the country. And this act is an umbrella legislation which is designed to provide a framework for central government coordination of the activities of various central and state agencies established under previous laws such as Water Act and Air Act, which had been established earlier. And this EIA notification is issued under this Environmental Protection Act of 1986. And the first time it was issued was in 1994 and it was latest revised in 2006. And recently in 2020 the draft notification has come out. This also we should remember, as it can be asked in the exam. So after this, let us look at the kind of questions that can be asked in prelims and mains. So in prelims, one can be asked directly about environmental impact assessment, when it was notified for the very first time. So it was in 1994. Then the latest revision was in 2006. And after this, a draft has been issued in 2020. Also, question can be asked about Environmental Protection Act of 1986. Then a question can be asked about social impact assessment as well, and important court judgments which are dealing with environmental matters. In mains, the questions can be about concerns with respect to draft EIA notification 2020. Also, a question can be asked on how can EIA be made more effective. So you can provide some suggestions. And finally, a question can be how to strike a balance between environmental conservation and the need for development. So this was all in today's editorial analysis. We'll see you next time with another editorial. Thank you.